Hello, and welcome to this month's Sovereign AI Industry Advisor Bulletin. It's April 2026, and we thought we'd kick things off here by taking a look at this joint statement made by the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, and the recent visit from the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb. And there was a lot of discussion and some agreements made, and one of the agreements was to collaborate on R&D innovation in the areas of AI. Just as a follow-on to Mark Carney's speech in Davos, he's been traveling around the world, and world leaders have been coming to Canada, typically middle countries, where you're seeing these joint statements, commitments being made around AI. Another recent one that we'll talk about is his travel to Australia. So here's the list of stories that we'll cover, and they range from stories in Canada, but also Europe, Asia, and Australia. And the first one is on Cohere and a firm in Germany, Aleph Alpha, and there's rumors that there are merger discussions. So this is important to us. Not many countries have large language model vendors. France has Mistral. We have Cohere here in Canada. Aleph doesn't offer sovereign models, but they do offer data sovereignty solutions, high secure LLM type solutions. And many believe a merger would make sense. I am surprised that Germany doesn't have a model themselves, a large language model, at least a commercial offering. They do have open source. And this was just released, I believe, just last week. And it's the official opening of a tender that allows organizations to bid on a sovereign compute infrastructure, which is funded to $890 million. So it's exciting, and I'm interested to see which firms are going to come forward. Probably a lot of my former colleagues from hardware companies are certainly going to bid. And the deadline's June 1st, so we won't have to wait too long before a decision is made here. Now, we thought we'd just also take a look at other people's perspective, other consulting firms, analyst firms on sovereign AI. And sovereign AI is something that there's a lot of different definitions for. And the Boston Consulting Group, well-known research analyst firm, really has positioned that sovereignty is an illusion, that it's really not attainable, that the real goal that organizations should pursue is resilience. And I can't disagree that the pursuit of total autonomy, total sovereignty is extremely difficult, if not impossible, for most countries. Only a handful would have the capabilities of doing it, and you don't see many countries announcing, well, we're going to build a fabrication plant to make our own chips. Again, the number of countries there is a small handful. But the recommendations for resilience, they look pretty sovereign as well. They do recommend a sovereign or domestic infrastructure. They do recommend having your models aligned with the domestic language, focus on adoption domestically. However, when it comes to developing the model and a lot of the partnerships, that it's practical just to go with the existing big tech solutions there. So respectfully, while I do agree on a number of points, I respectfully disagree in positioning this as merely a resilience play. And maybe it's just language, but I think it does matter that you are positioning this as a way to preserve culture and a way to reduce the dependence on supply chain risk. And right now, at least at this point in time, there is a supply risk by relying on firms located in the US. Now, if you were to tell me that in my research and studies of AI that I would be also researching the Geneva Convention and what constitutes a war crime. I would say that's not never going to happen, but uh, that's exactly what happened. So recently, with the war in the Middle East here, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued an announcement that says that potential targets will include Cisco, HP, Intel, Oracle. The list goes on there, mostly big tech firms. However, JP Morgan is also called out as one of the financiers that they view as complicit and involved in building the infrastructure that is behind the assassinations of numerous Iranian leaders here. So the Geneva Convention has identified civilian infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, as places that if you attack that would constitute a war crime. However, there is a gray zone. Gray zones are institutions that have dual purpose, things like a power plant that powers the domestic homes, but it also powers military installations as well. And so they've taken that gray zone and have extended that definition to include data centers. And so for the first time in history, we've had data centers being targeted, and they call it out because at the data centers, they have AI programs, and they cite that it's these AI applications that people are saying are being used for surveillance, for building military plans. So going forward is the question, what are we going to do? And people are seriously considering partitioning this and really being able to identify, okay, how much of this is being used for military purposes? Can we classify this as totally for civilian use? The Chatham House, a well-known think tank, just put out a paper recently, very comprehensive and trying to give guidance to the middle powers on how to develop a sovereign AI strategy. And for the most part, I think it's got really great recommendations. They also, like Boston Consulting Group, they really and maybe it's just labeling. They said, hey, if you can use a big tech vendor there, go ahead. It's more of a matter of risk management. It doesn't really need to be sovereign, but you're going to have to take on some risk. But in many cases, it's probably manageable. At least that's how they're positioning it. In Asia, this is an exciting, I guess, development of an announcement that was made late last year. South Korea has stated a very aspirational goal of becoming the third AI superpower, which would be after the US and China. Probably the third place right now, I think most might lean toward the UK. Certainly, many of the AI unicorns are there. But what makes Samsung stand out outside of the massive investment of $735 billion is they do have manufacturing. So today they manufacture memory chips, and they want to eventually plan to manufacture the total AI stack. So the potential's there. Some of the challenges going forward, despite all the funding, will be to attract the talent. And with this amount of money and amount they're going to invest in manufacturing, energy is going to be a challenge going forward. Australia. So I mentioned earlier that Mark Carney had some dealings with Australia, and in his last visit to Australia, there were talks about collaborating, working together as a fellow middle power on critical minerals, defense, and AI. Now, if you try to figure out what Australia's sovereign AI plan is. It's not a separate thing. It's part of their national AI plan. And they do have a sovereign plan when it comes to the energy agenda they have going forward, and it's known as the National Interest Framework. Now, another document that just recently was released is the National Expectations for Data Centers and AI Infrastructure, which really kind of combines the National AI Plan with the National Interest Framework here. And they're stating that the future AI factories that are being planned likely are going to be on-prem HPC type systems that should be located domestically in Australia. And the final story we have here is a new Forrester wave came out, an updated one on the sovereign cloud platforms. To nobody's surprise, the top three are your traditional hyperscalers, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google here. It would appear that they weren't influenced any by recent announcements from Amazon and how to make their offerings more sovereign, I guess, through legal type entities like they did in Europe. They really looked at the current offerings, their current strategy, and customer feedback. One thing I thought that was missing, and maybe they would say it's in a different Forrester wave, is the cloud platform. These are the virtual clouds. These are not, none of these are hybrid or on-prem type of implementations. And so those are the top stories that we were covering last month. And if you have any stories, please feel free to contact me. Thanks, and we'll see you again soon.